Now that we have a good understanding of the conditioned paradigm, we need to understand how to develop the constructed paradigm and how the constructed paradigm is formed and reinforced. Okay. So the first step to understanding this process is that there's three real types of behavioral change. Okay. There's outcome, there's process, and then there's identity. Okay. The real shift happens when you work from the inside out of this process. Okay. Most people try to change who they are from the outside in, right? Which is an outcome-based change, right? Which is it's conditioned. You're operating from a conditioned paradigm, right? So an example would be, setting a goal and building a routine around it and hope that your identity eventually catches up to who it is that you want to be through the goal that you want to develop. So I want to lose 20 pounds, so I'll go to the gym, right? This is a good example of the conditioned outcome-based habit setting, right? And the problem is that you're trying to change who it is that you are from the outside in, right? So you have no leverage over this position, okay? On the contrary, whenever you have identity-based change and you have a constructed based change, this approach basically allows change to start from the inside out, okay? Instead of chasing a result, you decide who it is that you are, and then you just act like it every single day, okay? Every small action becomes a vote for that new identity, and over time, the habit stops feeling like discipline and just starts feeling like who it is that you are, okay? So an example of this is, I am a healthy person. Healthy people move, so I move, right? Or I'm an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs work their ass off, so I work my ass off, right? So the difference is that you've already changed who it is that you are in your mind, so the action becomes natural. Here, the action is not natural here. The action is not natural here because you're fighting an uphill battle rather than allowing things to flow from the inside out. You understand? So, 3-part exercise. You guys can pause the video here if you need to. Number 1, decide the type of person that you want to be. Okay. 2, prove it to yourself with small wins every single day. And 3, resonate with the emotions that this person resonates with. Okay. Very simple. Once you have done that 3-step process, okay, what we need to understand is now we're getting to intention. Okay. Now we have a basic understanding of how to operate with the proper habitual change in alignment. Now we need to understand the intention. Okay. So right here in scripture, we basically have an outline of what intention is. Okay. Intention is the heart, right? Your heart is your intention. Okay. So it says here, I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit in you. I will remove your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. Okay. It also says, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Okay. Everything you do flows from it. What does that mean? Your heart is your intention. Okay. And what you need to understand about this is that the only way to have real clarity and control and leverage over your position is if you have a clear understanding of identity-based leverage. Okay. So what this is the Ikigai. Okay. And this is basically a compilation of your life's task and how to set your life up and have proper leverage over your identity and over your life through the clear intention that is your heart. Okay. So this is basically what you love, what the world needs, what you can be paid for, and what you're good at. Okay. Most people that are operating in misalignment, they're operating in what they can be paid for, right? They don't feel like the world needs it. It's not really what they love. Maybe they're kind of good at it, right? But they don't really feel like the world needs it, right? Which puts you in a state of misalignment, right? This diagram explains it perfectly. Okay. When you focus only on profession, you have no specification. And what happens is that you have no real leverage over your identity, right? I see it countless times, right? Entrepreneurs come to me making 150K a month, for example, and they feel empty, right? They feel drained. They feel misaligned. And I guide them through this process in order for them to understand that there's no level of money that's going to fill that void inside of your heart for what you feel like the world needs, what you love, and doing what you're good at, right? There's nothing that can compare to that amount of fulfillment, right? On the contrary, we have strong leverage, which is identity-based positioning, okay? Which is basically being hyper-specific with your passion, your mission, your profession, and your vocation. Okay, for those of you that don't know what vocation is like charity. Vocation is like things that you do to help other people. Okay, what this allows you to do is this allows you to have leverage over your identity. This allows you to have victory ultimately, right? Because whenever you develop for strong leverage, you're focusing on developing your life from the constructed paradigm. Okay, whenever you focus only on the profession, whether you like it or not, you are focusing on and operating from a conditioned paradigm, because the conditioned paradigm feeds this sort of idea that you need to only focus on your profession in order to be successful. But once you've achieved a certain level of success, you understand that it's more than the profession and that you've been fed a lie, right? So the problem is that you're still biting on the conditioned paradigm, right? Which is feeding this lack of leverage, which is feeding this lack of fulfillment. You understand? Now, in order for us to get clear on the conditioned paradigm, we need to understand what makes up the conditioned paradigm, okay? So first we need to get clear on the character audit, which is basically who you are at your core, okay? Values, traits, standards. We need to put this identity on paper in order for us to get clear on the next stages of how we need to operate and conduct your day-to-day existence by having the habitual alignment with this constructed paradigm, okay? Next, we have lifestyle audit, okay? This is who does your identity live as on a day-to-day, okay? Environments, habits, behaviors, and structure, okay? I need you to understand that this is more of a perspective thing and an emotional recalibration thing than it is material thing. Because if you still think about this from a material lens, then what happens is that you're not operating in the proper synergy because you're missing the point, right? And it's interesting because until you understand identity alignment processes, you will only understand it when you go through it, okay? Next, we have the prayer list, okay, and the affirmations. This is basically the spiritual and intentional anchor, okay? This is basically what you're calling in, what you're committing to, and holding yourself accountable to. Okay, this provides a spiritual anchor to who it is that you're becoming to reinforce this person with the proper identity. And from there, we have a strongly developed conditioned paradigm. Okay, so now that we have a clear understanding of the paradigm shift, okay, which is the intention plus the clarity, okay, we now have a change of foundational beliefs, right? You now have a better understanding, a change of foundational beliefs in how you relate and navigate to the world and this existence, okay? But the paradigm shift is not enough, right? The paradigm shift requires action to then result in the threshold of liberation, okay? The threshold of liberation is a compilation of action plus paradigm shift, okay? Which we're going to get into. So before we get into this diagram, I want to explain to you what this is, okay? Here on the left, we have the negative. We have death. We have flesh, okay? This is basically where the conditioned paradigm is pulling you to, okay? It's pulling you back, right? On the right, we have the constructed paradigm, okay? This is feeding positivity. This is feeding life. This is feeding spirit, okay? It's pulling you forward, right? So what you need to understand is that this is the polarity and differentiation and polarity in the agreements, thoughts, and words that feed your existence, okay? And what this does is provide compounding reinforcement to whichever paradigm, okay? So a good way to look at this is that the agreements, thoughts, and words that you feed your existence and that you allow into your mind are going to feed the compounding reinforcement towards whichever paradigm you're loyal to. So you need to understand that the only way, first you need to have clarity. We have clarity, right? And once we have clarity, we need to understand and be consciously aware of which paradigm we are loyal to, okay? And the way that we do that is by getting hyper clear and feeding the narratives and triggers for said paradigm, okay? As we talked about before, okay? The paradigm shift plus action equals threshold of liberation, right? So right here in the middle, we have the threshold of liberation, okay? This is basically breakthrough, right? In order for us to have breakthrough, we need to reach this level of the threshold of liberation, right? Which is paradigm shift plus action, okay? Action is the difference between low leverage and high leverage position, uphill and downhill, okay? Whichever position that you're in, whichever paradigm that you're feeding is going to pull you forward or pull you back through the narratives and triggers that you are allowing that you are allowing to reinforce your paradigm, okay? Misalignment basically comes from having a clear constructed paradigm, but operating in the actions of a conditioned paradigm, okay? In today's age of information, it's very easy to understand what it is that you need to do, but not have the access or capital, resources, or maybe perspective to live it out, right? So the difference is the action applied, okay? And what this does is this basically feeds the action necessary to reach the constructed paradigm through the threshold of liberation. Once you have the action and paradigm shift necessary, you reach this tipping point and everything becomes downhill from there because it allows you to develop the triggers and narratives for the constructive paradigm to pull you forward naturally towards life